Okay, so this is a little video to help us all understand what the multipliers from Unit 3 are all about. So follow along with me. This handout is available in the Unit 3 folder on the Google Drive. So if you want to download the paper that I'm working with right here today, you can. So Unit 3, the multipliers. Ultimately, the goal here is how will a change in spending or taxing impact the real GDP of a country? So we're going to do more with this in the course, but taxing and spending are both what we call fiscal policies. This is how the Congress and the president, by the powers of the Constitution, have the power to tax and to spend. So, depending on where people fall politically, some political ideologies favor spending or taxing more or less to help manipulate where the economy is, whether it's fully employed or whether or not we need to calm down an inflationary gap or to help spur a recessed economy. So, how would this play out in what we're doing in our course? So, let's say we have an economy that's in a recession. The question is, how will a change in spending? And what I'm thinking of in this particular instance is a change in government spending. But keep in mind that this spending can be any of the C plus IG plus G plus XN that make up aggregate demand. So theoretically, you could have a change in business spending. You could have a change in our imports and our exports. You could have a change in consumer spending. But ultimately, for this example today, I'm going to use government spending because it's the most common that we're going to be given as a problem in our class. So how do you solve this? How would you close the recessionary gap and bring the nation to full employment? So let's just say, for example, the United States economy had a GDP that was $50 million less than what we want it to be. So how do we get that $50 million growth in GDP? That's what the problem here is, and we're given the task to solve it. So what info do you need? Well, first of all, you need the country's marginal propensity to consume or the country's marginal propensity to save. Because these two things add up to one, as long as you have one of these, you will be able to solve this problem. You also need to know the size of the recessionary gap, or you might be given the change in spending and then have to determine what the size of the recessionary gap was or determine the change in GDP. So what's your first step? Your first step is to determine what we call the spending multiplier. So I'm calling that SM, and you can see I put it in parentheses here, the spending multiplier. The spending multiplier is 1 over the MPS. Now, many times in the AP exam, here's a little AP tip for you. This is like a coaching tip for you. They really love for students to do 2 steps. So most of the time, you're usually only given the MPS because they want to know that you know that 1 over 1 minus the MPC will bring you to the MPS. Because remember, people either spend or consume all of their income, 100% of their income. So a country's marginal propensity to save plus their marginal propensity to consume equals 1. So I bet you on most of the problems that you're going to have to do, you're going to have to do this second version of this. Most of them. Every once in a while, you're going to be given the MPS and you can just go forth with the problem. After you determine this, you are then going to take the spending multiplier and you're going to enter it in this equation. The change in GDP equals the spending multiplier times the change in spending. So again, it's not difficult math, but you just have to remember the order in which these things go in. So for example, if we wanted to have that scenario that I just suggested earlier, if we wanted to have $50 million of growth in an economy, we need to know that country's spending multiplier, and we need to know how much spending does the government need to do in order to yield the maximum growth of the GDP of $50 million. Here's a little disclaimer. This is not a guarantee that the GDP is going to change 50 million. It's just the maximum. So we're sort of saying, okay, if the government spends X amount of dollars, the maximum it can impact the GDP is by $50 million worth of growth. Okay. So let's take these steps and see what we can do. So the first thing is, because you can't use a calculator on the AP exam, the most common MPSs you're going to be given are going to be things like 0.8, 0.9, maybe 0.75. So all of those kind of work very well. These are the most common marginal propensity to consumes you're going to get. Then we have to change those to NPSs. So if I have 1 over 0.8, okay, I have to think about how to convert this, right? But I need to be careful not to do it as 1 over 1.8 because I need the 1 over the MPS. So what I need to do is I need to do 1 over 1 minus 0.8. And I find that this comes out to be 0.2. So how do I get rid of 1 over 0.2? 1 over 2/10. How do we divide by a fraction? It might take you back to middle school, maybe. I'm not sure when people learn how to divide by fractions. I feel like I learned it in 4th or 5th grade, but I'm not sure. We multiply by the reciprocal. So 1 over 2/10 is really 10 over 2. And that means that the spending multiplier in this problem is 5. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say the change in the GDP, we wanted it to be 50 million. And I used that as an example from before, if you're wondering where I got that from. Remember I said, suppose the size of the gap was 50 million, okay? So now we need to take that spending multiplier, which we just determined was 5 times what change in spending. So this is now, for me, I feel like this is pretty easy to do. We're going to divide this 5 out. 50 million divided by, sorry, I just totally did that wrong. I didn't need to do that. What times 5 equals 50? $10 million of spending. So $10 million of spending times that spending multiplier of 5 is going to give you the 50 million in GDP. And the answer to this question would probably be, we need to spend $10 million. So if you go back, let's say the economy is in a recession. How will a change in spending close the gap and bring the nation to full employment? Well, if we spend $10 million in this particular economy with a marginal propensity to save of, marginal propensity to consume of 0.8, we need to spend $10 million. So there's more problems that you can try. There's the multiplier practice handout that's in the Google Drive or even given to you in class. So give those a whirl. There's practice questions on the Connect assignment for chapter 28. Give those a try as well. So that's the spending multiplier. Check out my tax multiplier video.